What's up guys, my name is Ace, and today I have a video that a ton of you guys have been requesting from me since the beginning of my spawn guide series, and that is spawns for Team Deathmatch. Unlike my regular episodes which cover each map individually for domination, I'm just going to be explaining how the spawns behave in Team Deathmatch in great detail. While the behavior of the spawn varies quite a bit between game modes, the spawn locations themselves are exactly the same as in domination, so if you want to learn the locations, make sure you check out my previous episodes for that. I'll leave you guys a link to the playlist in the description below. Also, be sure to stick around until the end of the video because I'll be sharing my #1 tip for predicting the enemy spawn in Team Deathmatch, and this is something that I'm using all the time while I play Team Deathmatch. Let's get into it.
Whoa, what?
Alright, so just a disclaimer at the beginning here, there are always exceptions to the things that I'll be sharing with you today, and I'm in no way suggesting that what I say in this video happens 100% of the time. This is just designed to give you a really good understanding of how the spawns tend to behave most of the time in Team Deathmatch. So let's first kick it off with the general spawn behavior in Team Deathmatch, and then we'll talk about some specific situations that you'll run into that cause the spawns to behave in a different way. The way that I like to think about spawns in Team Deathmatch is in zones and blobs. Now, I know that sounds really weird, but bear with me, I'm sure I'll make sense of it for you guys. So in Team Deathmatch, I'm rarely trying to predict the actual specific spawn point, rather I predict which zone or group of spawns that my enemies are going to be spawning at. On Warhawk, for example, the spawns seem to group sort of like this. We have 4 separate quadrants to spawn in, and within each one of these quadrants, we have several spawn points. Typically, when a team is spawning in one quadrant, that will not change unless there's really significant movement of players. And this is where I'm going to start talking about blobs a little bit. So what do I mean about blobs? Well, basically, I look at it as if each player takes up a certain area of the map around him, or a certain blob, and this blob signifies his personal map control and his personal influence over the spawns. When teammates are close to each other, this area will merge and they will become part of a larger and more powerful area or blob of map control and spawn influence. When a player gets far enough away from his group of teammates, he is no longer really a part of this blob. He becomes an outlier and he just has his own little area of influence. So for example, we have the one green player that's pushed so far away from his team that he isn't even really considered as part of his team right here. He just isn't having any real impact on the spawns where he is right now. This is why one player can often push right into the enemy spawn area without flipping that spawn because he doesn't have enough influence. As soon as you have that second player push in with him though, it will often flip immediately. This is a good time to point out that a lot of the spawn complaints that I see are simply a result of a player that pushes way too far into the enemy spawn zone by himself, and then he has an enemy player spawn just around the corner from him and kill him. These situations are the fault of the player that pushed into the enemy spawn zone without any support, and it's not the fault of the spawn system. People always blame the bad spawns, but if the spawns were to flip by one player pushing into the enemy spawn zone, the spawns would be flipping around so much that it would be completely out of control and completely unpredictable. So just be aware, if you decide to be an outlier and push into the enemy spawn on your own, expect enemies to keep spawning around you. So just looking at this situation right here, it's clear to me that the red team is only holding control over the top left area of the map. This is where they will continue to spawn until the green team either pushes in and takes control, or until the general mass of the red team pushes out of that zone and starts to control a different zone of the map. Now that's all fairly simple since that team only holds one small portion of the map. What about the green team? Where will they spawn? Just looking at the same principles that I just discussed, you'll likely say that they'll be spawning in the bottom left zone of the map because the majority of the green players are pushed towards that direction, and also there are plenty of safe spawn points within that zone. This is actually not the case most of the time, and this brings me to my next point. In Team Deathmatch, the two team spawns rarely occur in adjacent zones. It's almost always opposing zones or corners of the map that they'll spawn in. So in this example on Warhawk, even though the green team has options and a ton of safe spawn points in several zones on the map, they're most likely to keep spawning on the bottom right zone in the opposite corner of the map as their enemy spawn. Now I know Warhawk is pretty simple for explaining these concepts because it is such a symmetrical and basic map. What about an odd-shaped map like Whiteout? What do these zones look like on that map? Well, it's pretty much the same, it just doesn't look quite so nice. If you're controlling and spawning at the top left zone by the logging area and the sea domination flag, your enemy is almost definitely going to be spawning near the dock area by the A domination flag in the opposite zone. It's as simple as that, and it behaves almost exactly the same on every single map in the game. Okay, so now I want to discuss a couple of really odd situations and sort of exceptions to my rules that you'll see with the spawns in Team Deathmatch. The first one is spawn flips. Spawn flips occur when a team loses control over their zone and can no longer spawn there. In these cases, the spawns will sometimes get a little bit crazy for a few seconds, and then they'll begin to settle down again. In these few seconds where the team doesn't have really a set spawn zone, the game quickly finds any safe spawns for them to spawn at, and it usually seems to be almost at random. In a lot of cases, they'll spawn directly behind their enemies, or they'll spawn in just really unusual secondary spawn locations that are nearly impossible to predict. After this initial wave of sporadic spawns, the game will usually decide where their next set spawn zone is based on their locations after the spawns. So just be aware that when you see your team push into that enemy spawn, there could be some really weird spawns happening nearby, so just be ready to deal with it. One other situation that can cause some sort of crazy and weird spawns is when you have a team that's all grouped up near the middle of a map. When this happens, it seems like their spawn zone is just constantly changing and flipping around the map, and because of this, the enemies will often spawn in like little pockets on the edge of the map surrounding this team. One second, they'll have enemies spawning on their left, and the next, they'll be spawning on their flank. A big example where I see this happen a lot is on the map Overlord. Oftentimes, one team will fight for and take control of the middle building on the map, which isn't really such a bad idea because it does have some really powerful positions. The only issue with this is if the entire team is in that middle building and a couple of enemies maybe get on their flank, the enemy team could start getting a split spawn where they'll spawn at both ends of the map at the same time. And this can be really difficult to predict, and you'll often get surrounded and you'll just lose control. When I find myself on the team that's pushed mid-map, I always try to push for an edge of the map to not only keep myself from getting surrounded, but also to try and anchor my team's spawns a little bit. And this will stabilize the spawns for my team. Alright, so those are the two situations where spawns can get a little bit hectic and unpredictable. Now, as promised, here's my #1 secret to predicting spawns during games in Team Deathmatch. Because as we all know, we don't have the luxury of having that full view of the map and every single player on the map. All we have is our mini-map. So we know that the game will almost always spawn teams on opposite sides or corners of the map. Using this knowledge, just pay attention to where you or your teammates are spawning during the game, and if a teammate spawns at one edge or corner of the map, the enemy is almost always spawning in the exact opposite edge or corner. Adding to this, if you're pushed really far away from your team, it's very likely that you're getting near the enemy spawn, so just be ready for some weird spawns that may be happening right around you. Remember, there are always exceptions and there are times where this logic basically goes out the window, but most of the time, this tip is reliable for helping you find the enemy spawn location, and I use it all the time while playing Team Deathmatch. This is literally going through my head the entire length of the match while I'm playing in Team Deathmatch. So that's all I have for this special episode of Spawn Guides. If you're looking to master the ability to predict spawns, I'm currently working on perfecting a drill that's designed to accelerate this process, and that should be coming very soon, I hope, so make sure you look forward to that one. If you enjoyed the video, a like rating is always appreciated, and don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.